You're listening to the Organize My Thoughts.
Hello, family, and welcome back to another episode of the Organize My Thoughts podcast. Hope you all are having an amazing week. And if you aren't having the greatest week, I hope that something happens where you just get to smile and have a little bit of a better week. In today's episode, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm just going to be sharing a little heart to heart with you guys. If you've been listening to this podcast since day one, then you know that I am a very self-aware person. I'm always on this journey of self-growth and just committed to being the best version of myself in all areas. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about ways that I can improve and all of these other things. So in the midst of one of my thought weeks, I spent some time thinking about why I haven't reach certain goals in my life. And I honestly had to realize that it was me stopping me. And so what I mean by that is one thing that I've always struggled with is putting myself out there. I know that sounds weird because you're actually listening to me on a podcast as I'm putting myself out there. But honestly, this is something that was never in the plans for me. This was always God's plan for me to use my voice in the different ways that he's called me to in both ministry and the marketplace. But again, this is super outside of my comfort zone. And so as I'm doing this, thought week, I'm thinking to myself about what are those things that are lingering under the surface that are stopping me from hitting certain goals that I want to reach? And during these thought weeks, I'm super transparent and vulnerable with myself because I think before, when I used to do my thought weeks, I used to keep things very surface level. But since I've been inviting the Holy Spirit just to say like, hey, show me what I'm really afraid of. Show me what's really lurking underneath the surface of all of these, what I like to call just surface level emotions, right? The things that we do to cover up the insecurities that we have. And so what he began to really show me was that I have a fear of looking dumb. I know that sounds like, it probably doesn't sound any type of way because I feel like a lot of people have that fear and they just don't really talk about it. So whether you have a fear of looking dumb or a fear of making mistakes, whatever it is, you have a fear of being unprepared. And I feel like that is what has come to the surface during this quiet time that I've been having. And it's been super uncomfortable because as a digital marketer, I'm literally helping other people position their businesses to be found online, whether it's optimizing their YouTube channel or designing websites, creating branding and marketing campaigns. All of these things, this is my job. And so I spend so much time doing it for other people, which I absolutely love. But when it comes to my own things, I'd be thinking to myself, like, why is there so much hesitation? And so I began to do some research because I'm a really big reader. I'm always in the library. I love reading new books. But I'm also just like a YouTube junkie. Like if I have something going on, guarantee I'm getting on YouTube and somebody's going through the same thing. So as I got on YouTube today, I found this video and I was listening to the woman just talk about the fear of making mistakes and the fear of looking dumb. And she was just so candid about it, which I absolutely love. But one of the things that she talked about was this thing that she had coined, and it's called gold star syndrome. And so gold star syndrome is the need to know the right answers and attempt to avoid failure, gain external validation, and ultimately avoid feeling any negative emotion. And y'all, when I heard this definition or this thing that she had coined, it wasn't so much about ascribing to this particular syndrome, but it was just having the language to articulate what I was dealing with. I think that was the more exciting part. And it just, so many pieces began to come together as to like why I would always be working on projects in secret and never really revealing them until the final product was finished, or why I would be willing to come on platforms where people didn't know me. Like when I came to podcasting, it was a whole new realm. Like nobody knew I had a podcast. And so I started being on here and I did an interview and then it really became known. And nobody knew I had a YouTube channel. I just kind of was building and growing my YouTube channel on the back end. I focused heavily on SEO optimization. And so that's just a fancy word of saying I'm using keywords and other back end strategies that are helping people find my content and really positioning my videos on YouTube right where people are searching. And the beauty of this was that my content was reaching people that are outside of my audience, and I don't necessarily have to show up on live video or do all of these things to promote it. And so quick plug, if you're looking to start a YouTube channel, I do have a YouTube course for beginners, and I'll leave the link for that in the show notes. But back to what I was saying about just focusing on marketing on the back end was a way for me to not have to deal with the anxiety and the fear of looking dumb or saying the wrong things. It was really a lot of anxiety that was at the surface level of this. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with growing your business on the back end. It's actually a nice level of flexibility to not have to be on social media every 5 seconds. But social media is a great tool, and it's a free marketing tool, the one that people should take seriously. And so I just reached this point in my life where I realized that I could no longer hide behind my platforms. One of the things about marketing is showing people the process, right? You want to get people involved. You want to get people engaged so that by the time you even launch your product, you already have a community, trust with your audience, engagement. You already have all of these things in place. And so you don't have to be salesy when you're selling or pitching your product or service. But in order to get to that level of transparency where you are having the confidence to show people a product that's not finished or bring people along this journey and publicly display your mistakes, I had to be honest and say, this is really scary for me. Because for so long, I would just work on everything in private and then present it when it was ready. And I feel like that is no longer sustaining me. And I want to challenge myself to be able to grow in those areas. And so having the language of the gold star syndrome, where it says literally it's the need to have the right answers in an attempt to avoid failure, gain external validation, and ultimately avoid feeling any negative emotion. Those negative emotions that I was feeling were feelings of uncertainty, feelings of like, okay, if I put this thing out there and I know it's not finished, that fear of being judged. And oddly enough, it wasn't even like, I don't really have a fear of being judged by strangers, like people that I don't even know. It's more so like getting comfortable with people that do know me seeing my work. And I know that sounds so weird. Usually it's like the opposite for people, but I don't have anything to fear from people that I don't know. But like, I think even it was revealing to me that I cared about people's opinions. We have a lot of people that say, oh, I don't care about that. I don't care about this. But the things that you do show that you care a lot more than you say you do. And so I just wanted to come on here and be transparent and say that, of course, this is a journey of really learning yourself, facing yourself. And we're talking about organizing our thoughts. And in order for me to really put some processes in place to even deal with this fear of being embarrassed or fear of making mistakes, I had to recognize what was underneath those thoughts. And it was fear. It's fear, it's anxiety, and it's that inner perfectionist, that inner desire to have it all gold and shiny. And in reality, no one's asking for that. I believe that the best thing about being in entrepreneurship or doing whatever it is that God has called you to do is that there's beauty in the process. And a lot of people appreciate that. But in our heads, we're always comparing ourselves to this person who's been like 10 years ahead of us. And then when we see their process, it looks all shiny, right? Like we're on Instagram or we're on YouTube and we're seeing everybody put their perfectly portion size ice cubes in their perfectly crystal clear glass right as the golden sunlight is coming in and hitting their white counters. And we're not seeing that they probably spilled the coffee when they finished, or they went and they probably like, I don't know, their battery died, something weird. You know what I mean? But like nothing is perfect. And I think for me, whenever I address this subject, I always hear people say, oh, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Or really, they say, don't be afraid to fail. And I just really don't like that word. And I began to think like, what does failure even actually mean? We always hear people say, don't be afraid to fail. But when I looked up the definition of failure, it means a lack of success or the inability to meet an expectation. And I feel like when I think of failure, that means like when you fail, you stop, like you fail. It literally says it is a lack of success. And I don't really feel like that's an accurate description of what happens when we are going about our process. I prefer to say like, instead of failure, you just made a mistake. And when I looked up the definition of mistake, it means an action or judgment that is misguided or wrong. And I feel like that definition is much more relatable to the experiences that we have when we are trying something new or trying to put ourselves out there for the first time and we don't have it all together. We're more likely to make mistakes along that journey than we are to fail, because even the idea of failing, like, it can't be a failure if you learn from it. It's really a lesson. And I was actually reading this book called People Tools for Business. And one of the quotes that the guy said was, experience is the name that we give to our mistakes. And I love that because it just caused me to just change the way that I viewed learning, change the way that I viewed being in uncomfortable positions, and even change the way that I viewed about the fear of looking dumb. Like, how can I look dumb if I'm in a process of growing? I'm in a process of learning, and I'm giving myself the freedom to be a beginner. And so I hope this all makes sense. Again, I just kind of want to share heart to heart because I definitely know that I'm not by myself in this. And first of all, I know that there were over 2 million searches just alone for the fear of looking dumb. So I definitely know I'm not alone in this. But I'm really going to dive into this in next week's episode where I just give some more strategy. But I just wanted to open up the conversation to say it's okay to be transparent and vulnerable about how you really feel about putting yourself out there. It's okay to be honest and say that you're not really there yet or you don't feel comfortable doing certain things, because it's not until the point where you get comfortable and honest with your thoughts that you can really begin to make some action. If I had never addressed the fact that I had a fear of looking dumb or a fear of being embarrassed, then I would have consistently been trying to hide behind my business or hide behind these platforms where nobody knew me. People actually care about what you have to say. People want to get to know you. They want to see your process. They want to see those imperfect moments and they want to see the lessons that you're learning along the way. And I think that it's so much easier to say that when you're working with other people, but when you are presenting yourself or you're presenting the things that you've been working on, it just feels so revealing. Like, I always describe it as like a veil being ripped off and you're like, like, I'm out here now, and it's scary, but it's really beautiful at the same time because we're giving ourselves the freedom to grow. So whether you decide to face your fears with a baby step or a giant leap, the point is that you are making steps. And I think that's something to be celebrated. You don't always need to make a 180 shift into a completely different field overnight in order for it to be something to be celebrated. Every step forward is worthy of being noted. So again, I definitely want to dive into this topic in more detail next week because I know there are so many people who are talented and you have all this expertise. You've been studying your craft, you know your stuff, but when it comes to putting yourself out there, you just get paralyzed or you just try to hide behind everybody else or hide behind your clients, and God is calling you to the forefront and it's scary, but I want to break this down in more detail. So this wraps up another episode of the Organize My Thoughts podcast. Again, join me next week and share this episode with your friends to invite them into this conversation. I love to hear from you guys on Instagram at _organize my thoughts if you've been feeling the same way. And if you have questions that you want me to address on the next episode, please send them over via Instagram. I love you guys so much, and I'll talk to you on the next episode.